So you're doing the audio on a small upcoming event, maybe you're hosting a party, or maybe you want to record some demos with your band in your own practice room. Well, for all this, we have an answer here at Bax Music. My name is Martin and I'm really happy that you're watching. Today we've got the Devine MixDesk 802 FX. Let's go. So what is the thing that I have in front of me today? Well, this is a smaller variant of the big mixing consoles that you see in studios or on front of house mixes in podia. And what this does is exactly the same, but then with 8 inputs instead of like the 20, 30, 40, 60 that you have on the big ones in the big studios. What this does is give you separate channels to put in microphones or lines or something else, and you can dial in the sound to build a mix that you can either record or send to speakers somewhere else to start making a party. So in today's video, I have the absolute joy and pleasure to tell you more about this very budget-friendly, high-quality device. To start out, I want to talk to you about the build quality of the Devine MixDesk. This one is built out of metal and feels very sturdy, and it has a certain amount of weight to it. Something that is very welcome when you pick something out of the box and it is ready to go. Especially in this lower price range, you usually expect stuff to be made out of plastic and not very durable. This is something that I would easily tell somebody to go take on a small gig or a party, and it will survive the trip to and from a lot of times, and everything about this feels really good for the price that you pay for it. One thing that I noticed besides the general metal housing is the faders have a nice feel to them. They have just the right amount of resistance that they feel comfortable, that they're easy to smoothly put up or put down a channel if you want to put it smoothly up or down. Next to that, we also got the buttons, which have a certain amount of resistance to them. They feel sturdy instead of flimsy and thin. It's very nice to find something like this within this price range. But besides the build quality, I'm going to talk to you about how to actually use this and what all these buttons do, especially if you're a beginner, which this product kind of lends itself towards. It might come off as a little bit intimidating. So let's take all that intimidation away and show you how it's done. So let's figure out what everything means on the Devine MixDesk. This is an 8-channel mixer, and the first 4 are XLR inputs, which you can also put in a jack cable right below it. So you got 4 microphone inputs that you can use at your leisure with all individual gain controls. And by upping or downing the gain, you, in a sense, up the volume of the microphone or lower the volume of a microphone. And if you want to see how loud you're coming in, you got these nice LED indicators that tell you the level of which you're talking, singing, or playing into a microphone. In audio, red is dead, so try not to make the red lights light up, but if you're somewhere in the orange, you're golden. So that's what you use the gain control for. And above this, we have a little button that says HPF, aka High Pass Filter. And what this does, it will eliminate all the sound below 80 Hertz, which in most cases you won't really need, especially for vocals. On my voice as well, I got the HPF on because I don't need that low rumble of maybe a truck driving past in the background. That's not something that is a natural frequency that will occur in my voice and information that I don't need to record right now. So I'm gonna press that button. So that's in general the first 4 channels. You can choose either to plug in an XLR or a jack cable or a TRS cable if you want to be technical about it. And that's how you control these 4 first channels. Next to that, we have 2 sets of stereo channels that we can put into this mixer, which will go to channel 5, 6, and 7 and 8. The first we find in the form of 2 RCA connections, so the white and red connector that we plug in here for left and right, and we got the same for the line inputs. One thing that you will notice is that we don't have a gain control for this channel. So what you can do on the line in is press this little pad button, and this will cut the input volume by a certain amount, but usually with these channels you want to set the volume that you're sending to the desk at the source. Below that we have a sea of dials and buttons, and I'm gonna explain to you how they all work, because especially as a beginner this seems intimidating. It seems like a lot to learn and know, but in a sense it is easy to understand if you're using this machine for a little while. And once you learn this, you can go to one of those huge units that you see in the side of the studio with 64 channels input. and it will work almost exactly the same. So what we got is we got 3 controls for equalization. And what equalization does is it will take certain bands of frequencies within the sound, and it will either boost them or it will cut them. So we got 3 bands for the main 4 channels where we can put in microphones, and we got 2 channels of equalization, or 2 bands of equalization for the stereo channels. I'm going to explain how the 3 bands EQ works, and hopefully you can use that information to figure out what a 2-band EQ does. It does the same, but it doesn't have a mid control. So the first button here is the high frequency control, and if I turn that up, you'll notice that my voice will become a bit more airy to the point where it even becomes sharp. So to add or lower the high frequencies can determine how airy or how top heavy your sound is. And for my voice especially, I like to keep it just above the middle, so it accentuates the right frequencies inside of my voice through this Devine M-Mic Pro. And below that, we got the same control, but then for the middle frequency. So if we push this way too far, you'll notice that my voice will slowly start to become a little bit nasally and not very pleasant, but a little bit of a boost can do a lot for certain voices. This is a little bit much for me, but I kind of like it. But we can also cut the middle frequencies, and then we'll sound a little bit thin. We lost a lot of body to our voice, and we're just left with the bass frequencies and the top end of the spectrum. But for now, I'm just going to roll this just a little bit above the middle again, and we're going to end up at the lower frequencies, or the lower register. And I always like to keep a little bit of bass intact in the voice, but we can also decide to completely eliminate it. And now we just have mids and high frequencies and not a lot of the low end. But we can also boost the low end to a certain degree, and that'll make me sound, if I push it too far, it will make me sound muddy. But finding a balance in the low frequencies can do a lot for the way that you sound to the world, and especially the equalizer does a lot to shape somebody's voice and the way that they are heard by the audience. Below this, we find 2 rows of red controls right here, and the first one controls the aux channel, so how much you're going to send to the aux, which I'm going to come to in a little bit. And the bottom one controls the amount of effects that you're sending to your effects unit, which I will also come back to in a second. But first, the aux. What the aux does is it will allow you to, just as the faders below, to make a mix, but this mix will only go to your aux send, which allows you to put a separate mix to either the monitors that your artist hears on stage, or to a different source where they might need a submix or a different mix entirely. Next to the control for the amount of level that you're sending to the aux send, we have a button for pre or post fader, and depending on what your purpose is for sending it to the aux send, you can either let the aux levels be determined by the fader or completely be separate from it. Next to that, we have a effects dial that I just touched on, and this allows you to dial in a certain amount of effects to your voice. Right now, you're listening to a flanger set to all the way to the max, but I'll come back with a little effects demonstration after I finish wrapping up this channel strip right here. So below the effects, we find a pan, which we can go left or we can go right with. So depending on what you're recording and where you want them in the stereo field, you can place that instrument or voice right there whenever you want to. Below that, we're going to find a PFL, or a pre-fader listening, which is very useful if you're using this in a live situation where you want to listen to something before you put in the fader at the bottom here. So you can actually listen to your channel in isolation without sending it out to the rest of the world, dial in your equalization, dial in your effects, and then once you're happy, put up the fader so everybody can hear. That is not just a useful function, that is absolutely mandatory on a MixDesk as far as my opinion is concerned. So that wraps up a channel strip, and I hope that that gives you enough information to start putting in a microphone and dialing in the sound as you see fit. So I've shown you how to dial in your gain, how to high pass filter your sound, how to EQ it, and how to send it to different parts on this mixer, either to the aux send or to the FX send. And the FX send, if you send your signal to that, which I've done, it allows you to add effects to your sound. And you're not hearing any effects right now, it's because my effects to mix is set to 0, or actually negative infinity. And if we open that up ever so slightly, you'll hear that I have a flanger on my voice, which makes me sound like this, which I think is really cool. So this is the effects section. And in this effects section, you got 16 effects to choose from, which you can dial in with a couple of these buttons. The effects to mix, which I have been turning on a little bit every now and then, is the amount of effects that you're sending to your main mix. But you also have a parameter control, which changes different things depending on which effect is activated. And we got a effect program select. We got 16 effects. I'm going to show you a couple of them. You've heard the flanger, which is really cool, but we also have a couple of reverbs, and especially if you're dealing with vocalists or singers or maybe even guitar players, they really, really like reverb because it takes away the imperfections, and me listening to myself directly from the microphone makes me a bit uneasy at times. And especially if you got to perform something very emotional, it's nice to have a little bit of reverb to take the edge off, like take the imperfections out of your voice by having it in a wash of nice reverb. So let's listen to a couple of these, and I'm going to start with my personal favorite, which is a plate reverb, and let's dial it all the way to the max. Welcome to Bax Music. My name is Martin, and today we got the Devine MixDesk 802 FX. We got a parameter control, which allows you to dial in the tail, so how long the reverb goes on after you say something. This is all the way at 0. This is all the way at max. And if you want a more realistic mix, I think we dial in something like this. This is something that would be very pleasing to a singer. It's hardly noticeable, but it still adds something to your sound, to your voice, that smooths out any imperfections. And it's just really nice to be able to sing while having a more polished sounding image of your voice, if that sounds correct. But this is how usually vocalists like to listen to themselves, not per se with a plate reverb, but with a little bit of reverb added to their voice. So let's change the effect to the arena, which is, yeah, as you can expect, massive. Welcome to Bax Music. The Devine MixDesk 802 FX makes you sound like you're in a giant arena while listening to yourself live, making it really hard to pronounce things. But if you put this effect on somebody who is announcing something, maybe you're using this to do your audio at maybe a carnival or a party or something, it is a really fun effect to use to get everybody riled up to enjoy whatever you're organizing. So you got effects like those in there as well for those kind of applications. Like this sound instantly reminds me of a carnival. Come here, come see, come get your cotton candy at the cotton candy machine. Welcome, welcome. But there are other effects that do more musical things as well. So let's try one more that might be a little bit more out there. Let's try number 11. And this is a stereo chorus. So this adds a chorus effect, stereo chorus effect, to your voice, and changing the parameter kind of changes the tone of the chorus. I am not entirely sure, but it definitely adds something. But this is with the chorus all the way on. We can also dial that back a little bit, of course, or up, depending on our needs. But this could be cool if you're maybe plugging in a guitar or a DI box from a guitar into here, but sometimes it might also be useful on vocals. So that kind of wraps up the effects section. There's 16 effects to explore, and the reason I only picked like 4 is because I can't stop messing around with the effects unit. So let's talk about the different buttons. So you've seen the effects to mix, which is the amount of effects you're sending to the mix. But you also have an effects to aux, so you can also send some of the effects channel to the aux. And at the bottom, you got a aux send and an effects send, which dials in the volume for these two outs right here. So that kind of wraps up the effects section. Next to it, we got a phantom power switch, which globally activates the phantom power for all your 4 mic preamps, which allows you to run condenser mics like this one. And at the bottom of that, we got a volume for your control room outs, which are the same as your headphone outs. That's why they share a volume dial. And what this does is you got the headphone out, which just delivers your headphone mix, but you're also able to send it left-right to a control room, which is nice if you're using this in a studio setting, or maybe just send out a copy of whatever you're hearing on the headphones to somewhere else, which is really nice. And finally, we've got the two master faders. So everything we dial in here. So let's say we got like 4 or 5 things, maybe 8 things dialed in here. And we want to have the mix a little bit softer or a little bit louder, then we can dial this in. But usually I leave the master faders at unity or at 0 and then dial in the faders right here or maybe the gain up here, depending on your needs, depending on the way you'd like to mix. Finally, we got a little foot switch up here, which allows you to do the same thing as the button right here, which allows you to turn the effects on or off at an instant. The foot switch is sold separately. So before we round off this review of the Devine MixDesk 802 FX, I quickly want to look at the backside of this mixer where we find 2 different options. We got 2 XLR outs, which I'm using to record the sound coming out of this unit, including all the effects. And we can also do the same, but then with TRS cables or 6.3mm jack cables. Next to that, we find a power in and an on-off switch. So that rounds up the entire overview of the Devine MixDesk 802 FX. You do have a couple of rack ears that you can get, that you automatically get with the purchase of one of these, which allows you to mount this mix desk inside of your existing 19-inch rack gear, allowing you to have this thing at the ready at all times. And because it's so sturdy, it will fit right in. So this wraps up the review of the Devine MixDesk 802 FX. If you like the way I made fun of myself using the FX sections, feel free to leave that in the comments below. And if you like this video in any way, shape or form, do leave us a like. Subscribing to the Bax Music UK YouTube channel is completely free, and you'll get to see more of these cool pieces of kit flying around every now and then. And I'd be very happy to see you again on the next video. My name is Martin for Bax Music, and I'd like to see you again on the next one. Bye-bye.